Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Footmux. I'm Varun, this is Jarrod. Today's episode of Footmux is on Brainfade cricket. So Jarrod, let's start by talking about the two cover drive theory, where or I like to call it the Schrodinger's cover drive, where a cover
Cool.
drive is either the most aesthetically pleasing thing ever, or is just a batter just who lacks patience, who lacks discipline, who
Mm.
can't leave the ball, and is everything that's wrong with modern cricket. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's something that I remember with Ian Bell. Ian Bell, he didn't reach out, but friends of his reached out when I wrote a piece basically suggesting that he chased the cover drive a little bit too much and he caused problems. And what his friend said, and his friend was a cricket coach, a well-respected person within cricket, sort of said, when it comes down to it, like essentially what you're doing is when he hits a cover drive and it goes for four, you're saying he's really good. And when he edges a cover drive and it doesn't work, he's not really good. And I can't remember if that was valid criticism or not, because I can't remember the piece that I'd written or what the situation is. But that's basically what most cricket fans do, right? That is a good shot. That is a bad shot. And I met a cricket fan at the Oval who was complaining about a shot that a player had played. And I said, but I remember chatting to you like 3 weeks ago, and you were going on and on about how this guy played incredible shots. Like, what the only thing that's changed is he went out to one of them. And I think that that's essentially what happens more often than not. You and I, do more work on this than most people do. There is an inherent danger to every attacking shot, right? Like there is a reason why people go out playing attacking shots, and there is a danger there. But you also have to try and score at a certain point, right? You can't just hope the opposition ball leg buys to you or something. So there is always a risk there. And so you play a perfect cover drive and it goes for four, and you play another cover drive off a similar ball and you edge it behind, and suddenly it's not a good shot. And I don't think that's the best way of looking at it. And I suppose what I tried to do in this piece was look at how much of it is execution. It might have been the right ball, but you played it wrong. It might have been that you played it to the wrong bowler or off the wrong ball or at the wrong time or whatever that may be. But that's not really what most fans do. If you've gone out, it's a bad shot. And if you're still in, it's a good shot. And that's not really how cricket works.
Yeah, I think especially like we've seen that a lot with Virat recently, haven't we? That's essentially the big discourse around him, where everyone's like, "Well, why doesn't he do a Sachin and just put the shots away?" Because I think the point you were making was he doesn't actually go out playing the cover drive; it's the weird push he did, where it's
Yeah.
like it's more of a like I want bats on ball kind of a push rather than I want to score a four push. So because we also have to realize that even like someone like Virat, for example, cover drive was his main scoring shot, and that's the case for lots of batters. Right? Not everyone's a Sachin who's got every single shot in the book.
Yeah, and also like this idea that you can suddenly change your muscle memory within a game and not play the cover drive anymore is probably not really that sensible, right? Let's say there's about 15% of batters who could do that, because I think that's probably fair. There are players who can within a game say, I'm not going to play this shot. Most people just don't have that ability, right? And then what shot is going to replace it? Are we saying if he doesn't play the cover drive, he just doesn't score when the ball's outside off stump, right? Like what does Virat Kohli become? And if you look at him at his best, when he was playing really, really well, he was using the cover drive and that push on the offside to essentially say to bowlers, you can't bowl in the channel to me, right? Because if you bowl to the channel, I'm not going to leave them. I'm not going to defend them. I'm going to continue to score. What happens when he's not that player anymore? Well, we know what happens when he's not that player anymore, because we saw Jimmy Anderson completely destroy him when he tried to take some of that away. So the reason that most players play attacking shots is because it's either a natural shot to them, or it's their way of getting the bowler off them a little bit, right? I've taken that away. So an attacking shot is in some ways a form of defense. Right. And that sounds very, very weird. And most cricket fans would never look at it that way. But if you're playing a cover drive on the up, right, you're probably thinking to yourself, I can't keep defending this delivery. But if I can play a couple of cover drives on the up, they're either going to have to change the field or the bowler's going to have to change his line of length. That's what you're doing with an attacking shot. And that's why you see players like Quinton de Kock's a really good example of this, of someone who he's got some very strong parts of his game, but he's got a lot of weaknesses. And he's like, yeah, but if I'm scoring at a strike rate of 70, 75, 80, good luck getting to my weaknesses, right? Rishabh Pant is, maybe the best example of this. And that's how attacking players play. But even defensive players, or regular players, I should say, play in a similar way. right? They're playing shots and they're taking small risks in order to be able to make sure that you can't bowl the ball that you want to bowl to them. It's just that it's much more noticeable if you're Sehwag or Gilchrist than, if you're BJ Watling.
Yeah, so the old mentality would be you respect the good balls and you attack the bad ones, right? But I think with how accurate modern bowlers are, it sometimes just isn't feasible for you to just wait for the bad ball. It's like, are we telling batters that, okay, like maybe like once every turnover is like a Pat Cummins will bowl a bad ball. You should only be hitting that for Cummins probably gets you out by then, right? And
Yeah.
whereas the modern batters are thinking, okay, if I all I need to do is a couple of risks to pay off and I can disrupt Cummins and then we can attack more.
No, exactly. It's funny. I was talking to someone recently about Malcolm Marshall, and they said he never bowled a bad ball. And I went, he did bowl bad balls. If you go back and you watch the ball-by-ball data of Malcolm Marshall, I'd say he was probably as accurate as most of the modern bowlers, which is one of the reasons Malcolm Marshall was so great. But he does actually bowl bad balls that you can hit. Curtly Ambrose and Glenn McGrath both bowled balls that you could occasionally hit. The reason they were so great is they came so few and far between that they generally had already got you out, right? So by the time you wait for that ball, as you say, if you're waiting 3 overs for Malcolm Marshall to bowl to slightly over pitch one on off stump, he might have already bowled you by that point, right? If you're waiting for Richard Hadley to make a mistake, good luck. And what modern players did was, I think when the wobble ball era takes over and the seam and the slightly more World Test Championship style pitches came in, I think there's a period, and you can see it in the data, where players tried to get more defensive, right? And they were like, great, we're going to grit and grind, and we're going to go old school. Did they make any runs in that period, Varun?
So I believe 2021 had the lowest strike rate in Test cricket since 2001, right?
Yep.
So it took, like for a 20-year period, I think it was only just going up. So batters, as we were just talking about, they did what they thought they were supposed to do. They were like, okay, we're supposed to dig in, we're supposed to grind it out.
And was there a jump in the average?
Absolutely not. They still kept getting out, right? And that's when the whole Kool-Aid of Bazball and like what would you call it? Like the regeneration of Travis Head, Punt coming into his own, all of that almost like started at the same time in 2022. And the strike rates do start going up.
And so what people would say at that point is, but that's because everyone's T20 cricketer now. But we still had Brathwaite in the game, right? We still had Elgar in the game. Bajara, like we had guys who were made for blocking who could no longer block anymore. And I think what you said before, especially I think bowlers are faster and more accurate than they've ever been, right? Mm-hmm. And part of that is to do with just natural evolution of bowling. Part of that is also, it would be hard to be a modern day Sean Tate in T20 cricket, right? You'd still have great days against middle order players. Top order players would probably score pretty quickly off you now because you'd be giving them options. So it'd be hard to be Shoaib Akhtar and it'd be hard to be Sean Tate right now. And even those guys sometimes had trouble even in their eras against top order players, right? So you have to be more accurate. And bowlers are becoming that. Then on top of that, you obviously have, this new delivery, which is really hard to pick for batters. It causes problems. You have the Kookaburra seam, all the things that we talked about before. The idea that you can just sit there and defend. England brought in 3 blockers, Joe Denley, Sibley, and Rory Burns. They just couldn't get the job done, right? And the reason is that it's just way tougher now to be able to do that than ever before. Go and have a look at the footage of Vernon Philander bowling at Virat Kohli for 4 straight overs or 3 straight overs, whatever it is. It's online. It's an incredible spell. And we have so many bowlers who can do those sorts of things now that you actually need to do something else. So as you said, what happens is that next generation of players go, well, that's not even our natural game anymore, right? So we don't have that. So you will still get players who will come through and will block, and you'll still get players who will, grind it out. But you'll also get players who think about cricket a little bit more in that sort of Sehwag, Viv Richards, Gilchrist style, which Trumper. Is, Trumper, any of those sorts of players where they're thinking to themselves, I cannot let this person bowl 6 balls at the top of my off stump or 6 balls on the back of a length outside a stump or whatever my weakness is. I cannot let that happen. Right. And so what I'm going to do is play like this. And so you have that previous generation, you have someone like Faf du Plessis, right? Who I think now, if Faf du Plessis came through the game, he'd probably average 5 to 6 runs more than he did, even though he batted in a pretty decent batting era. And the reason he'd average more is he would now just come down the crease and whack some of these guys who were just bowling little lollipops outside off stump to him, right? That was his big problem. foolish balls outside off stump. He couldn't help but nick them. He'd probably slog sweep them now, right? He'd probably come down the wicket and whack them back over their head. And then what do you bowl to Faf du Plessis? He's pretty good at everything else. And I think we're seeing a generation of players look at those weaknesses. Brendan McCullum, like, I keep getting caught in the slips. Okay, I'm going to play in a way that takes the slips out. Right? Now, what are you going to do to me? That's the generation that we are seeing coming through. So they're using their strengths. But also, as you said, I just don't think defensive cricket works in the same way in tests that it used to because of, we haven't even mentioned analysis. Everyone knows exactly where to bowl to every player now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely right. I think we've seen this recently in the the recently concluded England and India testers, where we saw both Rishabh Pant and Harry Brook do this in very different ways, right? So Pant does the, what do you call it, like the falling over scoop, which he almost does it so repeatedly. He dances down the track to both spinners and pace. He sweeps a lot. Like, that's his way of disruption, right? And he's been very successful with it. Like, Harry Brook is quite similar. Like, one of my favorite shots of Brook is the one where he dances down the track and it's fast bowlers over covers. I think he just does it so well, right?
Look, I think what Harry Brook does really well is he creates line. So he decides early on, if this ball is here, I'm hitting it here. And so it doesn't really matter if you bowl really wide or if you bowl really straight. He's already picked the zone that he's going. And what Rishabh Pant does is create length. Rishabh Pant's like, okay, if you're going to bowl, on off stump, or just outside off stump, back of a length, I'm going to come down the wicket and make sure that you can't do that anymore. Or I'm going to drop my whole body so that I can now pull that ball, or as you say, the falling down scoop or whatever shot he deems to play from that particular ball. So those two guys are basically saying your line and your length do not matter to us. What do you do as a test bowler? Literally, as a test bowler, most players have got to that level of cricket by basically bowling the same ball over and over again. And if you want a perfect example of how confusing this is, the best test match is the start of Bazball. It's the second test at Trent Bridge. Go back and have a look at Trent Bolt's face after he bowls good deliveries. He's like, this is a good delivery. I know this is a good delivery. And they've just smashed it over deep mid-wicket for 6. What do I bowl now? Right?
Is that the one where England chased nearly 350 overs?
Yeah, when at T we weren't sure what was going to happen and they struggled early on, and then Bairstow and Stokes going up. Yes. Go back and have a look. You've got him and Southey. There's a point at which, I can't remember if it's Bairstow or Stokes, one of them just comes down the wicket to Southey like he's a spinner. And Southey's like, exactly the same thing of, what is my next delivery? What's my delivery that follows this up? Right? And that's what we're talking about here, of how do you bowl against these modern batters when they do that? Now, the other side of that is that if you are charging down the wicket, you are much less likely to make contact with the ball. You're much more likely to hit the ball straight up in the air and everything else. And so that is where the good shot, bad shot thing comes in, of, is this a good shot when it goes for 4 and a bad shot when you go out, which it can't ever be that simple.
Yeah, definitely, right. I think we as a cricket community haven't gotten to that point yet where, for example, if a batter, let's say, plays a defensive shot and he gets bowled or he gets caught, you usually have like a 10 to 15 minute analysis talking about like, okay, was his footwork wrong? Was he playing on the wrong line? Is there a gap between bat and pad? But like, if a batter like tries to attack and he gets out, there just seems to be a thing of, oh well, he just played a silly shot. And Jarrod, like you can help me answer this question. Like, what is this magical situation where when the stars align and like, what do you call it, like the Mercury is in retrograde, that it's okay for a batter to attack, but every other time they shouldn't be attacking at all? Like, who decides what's a good situation to attack? I could never figure this out.
And I think that's another really good point of, we do it in retrospectively, right? Mm-hmm. It was so in the book, and I know you haven't read it, but other people have read it. In the book, we talk about Kevin Peterson in 2 different situations attacking recklessly. So one is the 05 Ashes, where he's clearly struggling against Brett Lee, right? And he's thinking to himself, what do I do against Brett Lee? If he's going to bowl fast and short, I'm just going to use his pace against him and hook, right? That's what I'm going to do against Brett Lee. And he top edges some, and he mishits some, and he misses some, gets away with it, and it's one of the great rear guard innings of all times, and he wins, one of the most important Ashes ever played, right? He's in an Ashes, 9 years later. They're chasing 500. England are going to lose, right? They're chasing 500, right? Let's just say this. They are going to, I don't know what the CricViz win percentage was, Varun, but I'm going to say less than 1%. They've already lost wickets. He's looking at this going, they've got 3 seamers and Nathan Lyon. all they have to do really is make sure that they don't tire out their seamers, and they will be able to get themselves into a position where Nathan Lyon bowls from one end and they could just keep rotating the three other guys, and they're eventually going to chip us out. So Kevin Peterson thinks the way he does, and he's like, I am going to hit Nathan Lyon out of the attack. And he probably goes within one ball of doing it, right? He hits a bunch of runs that, Australia, you can't just keep putting, it's very rare that you see a bowler just keep bowling when they're getting smashed, right? And the way that KP was playing, there was chances are that Australia were going to have to at least give him a rest, which is what KP wanted. He wanted one of the seamers to come back in out of rotation, right? Hoping that he could tire him out. Maybe he could tire out one of the others and do that. Instead, he hits the ball to long on, and he's caught by Ryan Harris. If that clears Ryan Harris, Nathan Lyon comes out of the attack, and KP has won that moment. So all we're really saying is, in one situation, he gets caught on the boundary, and in the other situation, he gets the ball just over the boundary's head. That's the only two difference between those innings, right? That is not how the world looks at it. And that's the problem here, is that KP's thinking is pretty sound in both situations, right? I probably won't be able to sit here and wear Brett Lee's short balls because I don't have the technique to be able to do that. And also, Brett Lee's bowling so fast, if he bowls to anyone else, he's probably just going to castle them at this point. My best chance is to get Brett Lee out of the attack. My best chance is to get the Australian seamers out of rotation and destroy Nathan Lyon. There is solid thinking behind all of this, but that is not how either of these incidents are reported on. Right? They are reported on. One is magical, and here's the future of cricket. And the other one is, look at this old guy still playing silly shots after all these years.
Yeah, I think that's one thing where I was a bit disappointed with KP once he started on comms, because I was hoping that he would bring that perspective into commentary where he's like, let's say, I don't know, like Brooke plays a stupid shot and Nas and Nats would be critical of it, and KP would be defending him and going, no, he's actually right, and explain the thinking, but he hasn't actually done that, which is strange for me. He's almost seemed to have joined the old brigade, and he's like, well, batters just play too many silly shots nowadays. I'm like, well, isn't that what you were doing when you were playing? So the whole thing is just confusing, because if we were doing it properly, I think the only person I've kind of seen it do is DK on comms, where he's like, you should be looking at the batters playing attacking shots and analyze why that attacking shot went wrong. Is it just bad execution? Was it actually, could also just be bad shot selection, right? That's also the case.
There's something you said before, and I probably should have put it in the piece. If someone, remember how many times Rohit Sharma would get a ball that would pitch on off stump and should have hit leg stump and hit off stump. Mm-hmm. And some commentator would be like, he's playing up the wrong line there. It's like, no, he's not. He was playing the exact right line. If you watch Hawkeye, he was playing the exact right line. The ball moved, and then he was unlucky enough that it hit the top of off stump, right? And we've seen the same thing happen to Joe Root as well. And yet the commentators sit there and go, but look at his feet and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, well, if you looked at his feet, the other ball that he defended 2 minutes ago, that probably came from the inside part of the bat, he probably was also in an incorrect position. You're only focusing on this one because he went out. And as you said, when someone plays a shot where it is a defensive shot and they've made a mistake, we get 15 minutes of analysis of, have a look, his foot was down too late. Have a look, his head was in the wrong position. Have a look, his hands were in front of his body. When someone plays an attacking shot, right, or especially one of these newer shots, and they play it, there's no technical analysis of them, right? And sometimes you look at the Joe Root shot to Jasprit Bumrah. The problem wasn't the shot. The problem was that he probably picked the wrong bowler because of the angle that Jasprit Bumrah bowls from, right? He was just a little bit more cramped on that shot. And so either he should have gone over his left shoulder and hit it over fine leg, right, and helped it away that way, or he should have just played that conventionally, right? That's a perfectly reasonable argument to make. But you can only do that if you look at it technically. And no one wanted to look at that shot technically. They just wanted to say he shouldn't have played that shot. These are the same people that got really excited when he did it the first ball after a break at Trent Bridge one time, right? Like, you can't have it both ways. And that's the problem that we have with cricket at the moment.
Occasionally, I also talk about behind the scenes stuff. A huge thanks to everyone who has supported us on Patreon and helped us build this channel. Join our Patreon community and unlock exclusive benefits. Enjoy AMAs, live calls with me, and connect with fellow cricket enthusiasts on Discord.
Yeah, so I think on the what shots thing, I think him and Nish was once talking about how with what the analysis he was doing with India was he was comparing Hawkeye darts with short darts, where he was like, he could look at the interception points and he could tell you whether someone played a good pull shot or a bad pull shot. Why is that not standard issue at this point, right? Like, why are we guessing this? Like,
Exactly.
surely you should be able to look at interception points, look at the Hawkeye darts, like combined with control data and shot data and determine whether who are the best drivers of the ball and why are they the best drivers of the ball, what are they doing differently, and who are bad and why are they bad, right? We don't. It's like we don't seem to be going that direction. Like I don't know if we're even close to that point at this point.
Well, I take it a step back because I think you're right. We still don't talk about control percentage and what does CricViz call it? Something else, don't they? What's the one that CricViz use? I only say that because they're the ones who often feed the data. But we don't really have that. So I don't think, I still think the average fan kind of believes that like a bad shot gets you out. There's actually, in Test cricket, 12 bad shots get you out, right? And so if every cricket fan in the world knew that 12 bad shots got you out on average, rather than one bad shot, would you not look at cricket completely fundamentally differently at that point? Like when I first found that data out, and I can't remember if it was Kartikeya or someone else at Cricinfo who sort of gave me that number, and I was like, well, this changes everything. Because now I know that Dean Elgar and Rory Burns are probably 18 bad shots, right? James Vince is probably 8 bad shots, right? Because of the way he plays. So we can actually start to put together a bit of an idea in our mind of why players are doing this and how they're doing it and how a player like Dean Elgar can mitigate his bad shots, and a player like James Vince, because of the style he plays, probably doesn't get a chance to, right? So if that's the case, James Vince actually has to be, this is going to sound weird, but James Vince has to be more careful than Dean Elgar, right? Because when he's playing his shot, he needs to make sure it's completely within his area to play his shot, because if he makes a couple of mistakes, he's probably most likely going to be out. And anyone who's ever watched James Vince in his entire career will know that. Right? Johnny Bairstow's another perfect example of Johnny Bairstow's probably going to be out more than a normal batter when he makes a mistake, because his mistakes are when the ball's on the stumps.
Yeah, definitely, right?
Right.
Again, it's like I don't know. Again, it's like that's probably the direction. I think that's where I heard that stuff the first time from you, and that definitely changed the way I looked at cricket, because I'm like, oh, okay, it makes sense, because I'm like, I'm not looking at the batters and thinking, oh, they're just going to get out at any point. I'm like, okay, they usually odds are that once I can find out that the number is close to 10 or 12, then I'm expecting a batter to go out. If they haven't, then I assume there's a bit of luck. And if they get out before that, I'm like, maybe there's an element of bad luck there with them. I think that's how we should be looking at batters, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then once we do that, I think that allows us to go to the point that you were talking about of interception points, of is this, we can actually tell now, we can put this on the screen. Most companies in the world have access to CricViz if they want it, right? Most of the major TV broadcasts. We can actually, Varun, put it on the screen, something that says cover drive from this ball is averages 15 runs.
Yeah.
No person who's ever watched cricket needs to be told that that's a risky cover drive once they see that stat on the screen, right? It's risky. And then you get to the point of which you might say someone like Zach Crawley, he's probably going to average 25 off that, where another player will average 12 off it, because he could step closer to the line of that, right? But there's the other balls that Zach Crawley is driving. No one in world cricket can drive. And it turns out he can't drive either. And he's averaging 22 off those, right? I'm just making a guess here, but based on the way he plays, right? And so that's not on the screen. We have all that data. Like when I worked with TalkSport, we had the CricViz stuff, and I could say, me and a friend, we had this point of where we would we never sent it to CricViz only because it wouldn't have worked without Hall code data. But like sometimes you see, have you ever watched any of the replays of balls in county cricket?
At times, yes.
Yeah, when you see that ridiculous ball where a guy's like bowling a ball that's going to miss leg stump and it hits the top of off. And me and my mate will send each other messages, go, what do you think the expected average is on this ball? Right. and we both come up with this theory that when the ball's moving back, the expected average should be slightly higher, based on the fact that if you get an inside edge, it's probably 4. Right? Like no one's stopping that. But if you get an outside edge, your chance of being caught in the slips or being stopped by slips or gully. But we've got these ridiculous things. The point being is, you can get your head around this. And if you put a number to these things, we can say the expected average off that ball was 3, right? Which means that you're either going to defend it or go out to it. Those are your 2 options off that ball. And this guy ran down the wicket and tried to slug it over deep the wicket. We could say then the chances, the likelihood of that is not going to make sense. So we can put that on the screen. The other thing that we talked about before is, as I said, okay, so you're going to play, whether it's an attacking shot or a defensive shot. I don't really care what it is. Did you execute the shot correctly? right? That's the Jeffrey Dujon point, where Jeffrey Dujon says 99% of dismissals are batter's error, right? 99 and 95, he changes it all the time. But it's basically, he doesn't believe that bowlers get batters out all that much, right? We can disagree on that number, but he's right that it's very rare for you to go out if you've done everything technically correctly, right? But it's hard to do. Most batters don't do that for any ball, let alone the very good ones. So did you execute the shot correctly, right? Was it the right ball to be trying that shot off, right? So if you look at the Harry Brook one, and I talked about this on the video, Harry Brook tries to sweep a incredibly full ball from Akash deep, right? That happens to be straight. If that ball's outside off stump, it's probably quite easy to paddle that away. But because Harry Brook gets on the outside of it, right, because he's premeditated it, and then Akash bowls it straight, you'd have to say that Harry Brook is in the wrong position to play that shot. Because anyone who's ever swept a ball, even off a spinner, will tell you, you'd much rather sweep a ball straight at you or outside off stump than you would down the leg side. The guys who could sweep down the leg side are geniuses. It's really hard. I remember playing a shot like that once in a game and being like literally running down the crease, almost saying to the ball, did you see that? That was down the leg side. I swept that beautifully, right? Like I was so excited. Whereas generally most of my sweeps down the leg side, I've just missed the ball, right? Well, he's trying to do that off someone bowling 84 miles an hour, right? So once he gets himself in that wrong position. So did you execute the shot right? Was the ball in the right area, right? And then was it the time and place to be playing that shot? Right? I think that's a valid question. If you run down the wicket the ball before lunch, right, and you try and flat bat a ball for 6 and you pull it down onto your stumps, that's very different than doing it half an hour after lunch, right? It just is. We just know that. If a wicket's just fallen at the other end, right, and you've got a new batter in, and now you've got potentially two new batters in if you play a shot. So we can factor all those things in. We can put a matrix of it of like, I mean, I think where I want to get to, Varun, is we're never going to have access to expected average or all those sorts of things as a general cricket population. But we can probably come up with a bad shot matrix of, did he execute it right? Was this the right bowler? Was this the right delivery? Was this the right time? And maybe the last one you would put in that was the field set for this, right? So if you look at the Harry Brook one, Harry Brook is about 2 balls from probably almost winning that game for England at Lords, right? Because Akash Deep can't keep bowling. One of Siraj or Bumrah is going to have to come back in too early. The run, we now know that was an impossible pitch to score on. So if they had got, another 20 or 30 runs there, India would have been in even more trouble. However you look at it, Harry Brook was in that position. So you could say he was attacking at the right time. You can say that he was exploiting the field. But he executed the shot poorly, and it turned out it was the wrong ball. Now, that's part of the problem with premeditation. If you premeditate and the ball isn't where you want it to be, you've got to be able to play maybe a slightly smarter option. I don't know if he needed to sweep that ball in the end. There might have been better options. Probably the scoop would have been a better option, but he couldn't play the scoop because they'd moved the field. So now you're in this situation where you've premeditated. So you probably just need bat on ball. Right? Instead of going for the big attacking shot, what he could have done is gone for just simple bat on ball and been like, even if I just get 1 or 2, it's better than potentially being out. So he had other options within that. So I think that's kind of the bad shot matrix that I want us to get to, so we can actually start to think about this of where it goes. And there are shots that I've pointed out in my piece, like the Joe Root shot, where it's like probably every single part of that suggests that was a badly executed shot against the field. It was the wrong shot choice for that delivery. It was at the wrong time. Any way you want to look into that one from Joe Root, he probably did it wrong. That is your classic bad shot. Whereas some of the other shots that we see from Rishabh Pant, the Sunil Gavaskar and all this sort of stuff, like when Rishabh Pant gets down to play that ball, what fielders is he thinking about? He's not thinking about deep third, is he? He's thinking about everyone else. And if he'd played a shot where he'd slashed it away and he got a catch at deep third, Gavaskar wouldn't have been as angry. But he's literally trying to hit the ball the other direction, and he's got an edge. He could have got an edge, like trying to flick the ball to mid-wicket and got a leading edge to cover. And all Gavaskar would have said is, bit of a soft dismissal.
Yeah, definitely. Although, I must say, I'm probably more conservative about this than you. I don't really like scoop shots very much. Like it's the one shot and like I'm like I just don't like it. I'm all for like dancing down the wicket, but it's the scoop shot. I just think it's like I don't think the risk to reward ratio is just worth it at any given point of time, because we were just talking about the field settings, right? It's like that's the other variable that we just as it like cricket just doesn't track, because whether or not something is a good or bad shot is how much of that is also just entirely to do with the field, right? Because if long off and long off are back, like completely back, then dancing down the track to spinners and clearing them is a much riskier shot than if you only had mid off and mid on. In that case, maybe like the shot execution has to be like 9 out of 10 instead of like a 7 out of 10 if there is no fielders, right? So that's probably where it's like we just aren't tracking it. I think I was just recently watching the highlights for the Old Trafford test on day 5. So Dawson was bowling to Jadeja, and then they had a packed offside field. He's bowling wide, and Jaddu dances down the track and he hoiks it over deep square leg. If you just look at the shots on its own, right, it looks like a terrible shot, but because there is no deep square leg, it's actually quite a risk-free shot, right? But if there was a deep square leg, it's a horrible shot. So
Exactly.
that's I think we have to take these things into account. But it's at least with Crickquiz and all of them, you could say the data exists, you can do it. This is like cricket has to completely change its infrastructure to be able to track this.
So here's my question for you. The scoop's really interesting. I think the scoop average is about 25 in Test cricket. You might be able to look it up while we're chatting, but I think it's something like 25. It's not a high average shot, right? So if that's the case, if I was to tell you that you would get 25 runs before being dismissed off the scoop, is it not worth playing the scoop to take a slip out?
Nah, I don't get it. Unless I'm just not a fan.
So
of
I
the
think it
scoop,
is.
Jarrod. Yeah.
No.
I'm
I
not a
see.
fan. Yeah.
I'm not. But forget the shot. If I told you there was any shot in cricket where you were probably going to get away with, and the scoop is almost all of them are player misses or boundaries, basically, right, or wickets. There's almost no singles from scoops, right? So you're probably, let's say, for 24 runs, you're looking at about 12 scoops, right? Are you willing to risk 12 scoops to take away a slip before you get out? I would say yes. If you gave me that mass, and I'd be like, great, because I'm a lot more likely to play conventionally and get an edge to third slip, especially if I'm that kind of batter, than I am to go out playing the scoop once or twice. And I only need to play the scoop once or twice to change the field. So when I worked with Scotland, and I was talking about the reverse sweeps quite a lot, and I was chatting to, I think it was George Munsey and oh my God, I think it was Ollie. I was talking to those two guys about it because they're both reverse sweepers. And I said, you actually only need to play the reverse sweep once or twice. And Munsey was like, and I said, yeah, but once they put the field out, now you can play a slog sweep or a conventional sweep. The conventional sweep will go to the fielder. The slog sweep, they can't cover that corner anymore, right?
So so just looking at the scoop, I think the traditional scoop is averaging about 37, and the reverse scoop is 14. I think since 2018, I was looking at.
Yeah, so 25 about. I think that was what I looked at. I think it's really hard because people classify the scoop as all different shots as well. Sometimes people put an uppercut, and I was like, it's not an uppercut. But yeah, so what I was saying to these guys is, especially during the power play, of if they don't put the fielder out, and this would happen to Munsey quite a lot, and Munsey's at one stage was probably the most prolific. Proficient,
prolific or proficient?
I mean both of those words, really.
Yeah, okay.
Reverse sweep in the world, and I was like, if they don't put the fielder out, as far as I'm concerned, you should hit that shot all day, right? Just keep hitting that shot, right? But once they put the fielder out, you're also really good at slog sweeping, right? And because he's a strong guy, I was like, also, if you wanted to, you could be in a situation where you can do a conventional sweep and maybe one of your three conventional sweeps is going to beat the sweeper as well. When you're playing the reverse, you're a brilliant player of it, but you're putting in a risk that you don't need to put in once the fielder is there. And so I kind of feel the same with the scoopers. If I was playing in a game and I had a player who's good at playing the scoop and the opposition just refused to put a fielder back, I think I'm willing to say in that situation, Varun, go, just keep playing it, right? But once the fielder's back, I feel the job of the scoop is done. And I think a lot of these situations, that's where I think some of the issue is that you should be playing attacking shots to change the bowler's line of length and to move the field. Once you have done that, a lot of the rest of the attacking shots are for your personal ego, right? I'm not saying don't keep looking for boundaries, but if they move long on, like there's that. Do you remember that time when Jack Leach is bowling to Rishabh Pant, right? And he's got a long off, a long on, and a deep mid wicket out, and Rishabh just keeps going, and it's like he almost gets caught. I think twice, maybe a long on is one of them, and a deep mid wicket. And I understand why he was doing it, and also I think it makes it really hard for England to bowl Jack Leach at any point during that series. So I understand it, but at a certain point, he didn't need to do that anymore because he could score at a runner ball without taking a single risk from then on in, right? Because there's nothing that Jack Leach can do anymore. He's already been defeated. But what Rishabh Pant would say, and I also agree with this, is Rishabh Pant's going, yeah, but if I've now shown Jack Leach he can't bowl into the foot marks, so they can't bowl him to me at all. And also, every time I'm at the crease, they can't bowl him anymore. That stuffs up England's rotations for the rest of the Test series, right? So you can understand that. But there are other situations where it is more about ego, right? And going, the Jamie Smith one in the Test at Edgbaston, where I think I was on comms and I was saying, these shots are great, but he's hit 3 sixes in a row. We've all watched T20 cricket. Eventually, you hit one straight up in the air, right? And I think it was the fourth one he hit straight up in the air, right? That's ego. He doesn't need to play that at that point. That was the slower ball. He could have literally stopped and grabbed that ball and thrown it back to the bowler if he had to. He could have knocked it on the head, taken a single and got off straight. That's where I think, again, we have the chance to say, he's made a mistake. They are now bowling for this shot. They have the field set for this shot, right? And he's only hitting the ball up. It would be different if he's trying to hit some fours as well. But he's literally, as you said before, he has to get 9 out of 10 connection on all these balls, right? I think that's a valid point to be able to say when you're trying to draw a game and you've already made your point. You can't bowl short to me. I think that's fair to say that there's an element of ego in what Smith was doing there. I think what most people would say, though, is the vast majority of these shots are ego. Whereas I think what we would say is the vast majority of these shots are about disrupting the bowler or moving the field. And that's actually what batting is, right? If you go back and you look at Brian Lara, we know how egotistical Brian Lara was, right? He loved moving the field. He loved doing that. Actually, I'll tell you, the great story is the Garfield Sobers one where he was facing a guy whose job he wanted at Nottingham. And he literally hit a ball to third, a ball to cover, a ball to mid off, a ball to mid on, a ball to mid wicket, and a ball to fine leg, right? As if to say, you can't bowl to me. You're not good enough to be on the same field as me. You shouldn't be the overseas pro. I should be their overseas pro, right? That's what Sobers was saying in that situation. You can argue that there is ego there, right? But if you take that and you go to the Brian Lara way of going, of like, you've now got a deep backward point, and you've got 5 fielders in a row on the offside. Well, I'm just going to pick a gap between cover point and mid off. Right? Sorry, extra cover and mid off. And I'm going to hit the next one there. All right. So now you're going to have to move the field again. Now I'm going to hit the next one here and do that. There's an element of ego that is evolved in that. But what he is basically saying is, if you keep bowling outside off stump to me, you do not have enough fielders to stop me from scoring. So you're going to have to change your tactic at a certain point, right? And I think that's when you're using it to your advantage. And when you're using it maybe the way that someone like Jamie Smith did, you're not using it to your advantage anymore, right? You're just giving the bowler an opportunity to dismiss you when he was seeing the ball like a beach ball. Like, how is he going to get out in that game?
Yeah, so I think the one reason I don't like the scoop is I think most batters just use it incorrectly. Because for me, the scoops make sense if you're hitting, I don't know, like a Yorker length ball over fine leg or third man. For me, it's like, if it's a length ball, I think, especially if you're a strong batter, why aren't you just hitting it over mid wicket? If you look at, I think AB is probably the best batter of scoops I've seen. Where if you bowl length to him, he'll just hit you over deep with mid wicket all day, every day. But if you bowl a Yorker, that's when he does the whole, I think Harsha calls it being like a rook in chessboard, where he'll just shuffle across his crease, right?
But when you say hit to mid wicket, so think about what you're saying. What ball are they reverse scooping? They're reverse scooping the ball that's outside off stump. So you're now saying that you want these players to play massively across the line with... No,
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, I've seen batters scoop balls that are something they should have hit over deep mid wicket. But I feel if it's...
Yeah, but that, again, you're But they've already premeditated that. How do they know that that ball should have been hit to mid-wicket? That's the problem with the premeditation, right? So once you premeditate, you are in a situation where you have to kind of go through with a shot. I think, it's funny, I was talking to some bowlers about this years ago when these sorts of shots all started. And I said, I don't think there's any issue with a lot of these shots. The issue I have is players haven't come up with, I don't want to say a counter is the wrong way, but a backup, right? I've got into this position. Who was the player? Was it Rishabh Pant who ended up with his foot off the wicket for one ball?
Yeah, that's not a lot, Jarrod. I think you have to be more specific.
Was it Rishabh Pant or was it one of the England players? Someone ended up, no, it was Ben Duckett, wasn't it? Who ended up off the pitch, right? I haven't talked to Ben Duckett about this, but I'd love to talk to him. There's a couple of balls of Ben Duckett's I really like to talk to him about because he makes the decision to play that shot, to play the scoop, right? The bowler sees him getting into that position, and Ben Duckett has no B game, right? And so all he does is ends up almost falling over. The only reason he's not dismissed off that is because he misses it by so much, hits him in the arse, right? Like that's how far he is from the ball. It literally hits him on the back of the arse, right? Or the back hip area. And so I don't think batters have this sort of backup separate game that they should have for some of these shots. And so it's not that I'm against the scoop or the reverse sweep, because I'm much more pro them than you are. But if
I
you
like
have
reverse
that
sweeps.
shot,
I'm just not a fan of the scoops.
yeah. Do you know one of the shots I really like, which isn't in this piece, but I've written about it before? Ollie Pope used to do this all the time. He used to run down the wicket, right? Make sure his pads are outside the off stump. And instead of smashing the ball, he'd just flick it off his pads. Right? And I thought that was such a great shot for a player who's really limited, because essentially what he was saying is you bowl 83 miles an hour, 84 miles an hour. 2 steps, right, down the wicket is not going to affect your pace for me. It's not going to suddenly make you so quick I can't play you. If I can get outside the line of off stump, you basically can't get me out LBW, or I have to be pretty unlucky. And I'm not playing a big risky shot. I'm keeping my head over the ball and I'm flicking it to the leg side. If I make good contact, it's 4. If I don't make good contact, it's 1 or 2. And you can't bowl that delivery to me anymore. You're going to have to put a fielder out at that position, and I'm off strike, or I've got a boundary. I thought that was absolute genius. And I suppose that's what I'm saying is, if every premeditation you make is about hitting a boundary, when you get into a position where the ball isn't in the right area and you don't have a backup shot or a safer version, then you're as you said at the start, you're hoping that your execution is like 8 or 9. To play a scoop, you have to make such good contact, right? Because if you don't, it can go straight up in the air. You can miss it. You can be bowled. You have to make really, really good contact off the ball. If you have a backup shot, which is, I think I saw Butler do this once, where he was going to scoop, the bowler actually ends up just bowling sort of back of a length and slower. And so he almost like plays an old-fashioned guide to third man. How is he going to be out to that ball, right? It's very hard for him to drag it back onto the stumps. If he gets an edge because it's a slower ball, it's not going to carry to anyone. And he can guide it away through a gap and get 2, probably 1 at worst. And most likely he's still going to get a 4, because the reason he was playing that shot in the first place is because they would have had short third and maybe backward point up in the ring. So you can have backups to these shots. And again, I think that's one of the issues of, if you're going to get down and play a big reverse sweep, right, or a switch hit or something like that off a spinner, when the ball's not in the area that you wanted it to be in, shouldn't you also be able to play a defensive shot?
Yeah, completely. I think so. The thing I'm most worried about with these kind of shots is I think batters who do play them sometimes think it becomes their personality. Like I think Pant to me is at his best when he's playing traditional shots and he's using these like the unorthodox shots to disrupt. Right, I think when he gets into trouble is if he thinks that's all he has to do. It's almost a bit like the whole Bazball Kool-Aid thing. Rishabh Pant, when Pant buys into Pant, that's when I think he gets out playing, looking silly in silly ways. Brook, I think, is quite similar. Right? I think the entire Bazball team is like quite similar. It's when it stops being a plan and it becomes your personality. That's when you get into trouble.
I think you're right, and I think if you look at it, I think Bazball's at its best when they play the aggressive shots and they move the field, and then they milk the field. Yeah, I know that it annoys the shit out of you because you get really bored when they just start hitting the ball to sweepers. And we saw that. Isn't that what Brook and Root did for that huge partnership, right?
Yeah.
Brook took all the risks early on, completely flattened India, gave them huge problems with their shortened bowling rotation. And then they just milked the field forever. And how is he out? It's going for a final kill again that he's eventually dismissed. Now, I can give you reasons why he played those shots. I think he thought, again, for the second time in this series, he probably thought one more boundary of Akash deep here and I've got India and the game is over. But the 2 times he looked most likely to go out in that innings of 100 at the Oval was when he was going nuts. When he was knocking the ball around, India looked like they had no idea of how to bowl to Harry Brook. And so you look at some of these chases, the Headingley chase is a perfect example of they took some risks, they moved the field out, and then they just played normally and they just exploited the field. And I do believe that there is certainly a lack of that at times within some of these guys. But I also understand that you can't have it both ways. The reason they move the field out is taking the risks, right? And they are risky shots. It doesn't matter if you are, I think there was one that Harry Brook played off Akash Deep where he stands in his crease and just hits him over long off for 4 or 6, right? That's also a really risky shot off a frontline test bowler, right? With a couple of slips in place and everything else. There's a bunch of ways that can go wrong. But once you do that, where do you bowl to him? He's already lapped 2 balls over the top. Are you going to have long off out and a deep fine leg, maybe a deep backward square leg and a deep point? Well, now Harry Brook can knock it around. And so there should be risk in attacking shots, right? But there's a reason that you're playing them. And I think that was the only thing I would say to a lot of modern players is, do you know why you're playing these shots? And as you said, sometimes it does come back to, oh, I'm punt, so I play them. And it's like, but you don't need to play them, right? There's a great story of Javed Miandab when he would get bored in county cricket, right? And he would smash the ball everywhere and they'd put all the fielders back on the boundary. And then he was like, oh, this isn't any fun. Now, like, I play a great shot and I only get 1. And he would really play either defensively or even sometimes look scratchy so that they would bring the field back in so he could then play a bunch of shots again. And if you look at him in Test cricket, you can actually see a similar pattern. It's not quite as full on as it was in county cricket, but you can see a similar pattern. Not everyone is made to milk. And that's also part of it is like a lot of players like to score 2s and 4s, right? They like to get maximum from them. But I kind of feel once you've got 4 players, if you've got 4 players out in modern cricket, how do you keep the scoring rate to under 4 runs and over?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so I think it's like, so on the situation thing again, Jarrod, so if talking about what Brook wanted to do, like, I know it's a bit of a tangent, but I think we've seen IPL games, for example, where a team needs 20 runs in the last 2 overs, they have 6 wickets in hand, a batter hits a 6 and a 4, and they win easily. But I've also seen games where a batter tries to hit a 6, gets out, the team loses by like 4 runs or something, and that batter is scrutinized like for the next week because he didn't take the team home. I think that's why the whole magical situation confuses me, and that's why I don't pay too much attention to it, because I'm like, isn't a shit ball regardless of the situation? And a shit shot is a shit shot, right? It's like, it can't be shit when it's at like 200 for 2 and great when it's like, I don't know, like 250 for 6 or like vice versa, right? That's why the whole thing confuses me at times.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really fair. Of how many times have we seen the situation you just said happen? And it's like, you can't win. Essentially, you can't win unless you win, right? And that doesn't make any sense because even Bradman only made 100 every 3rd match he played, right? Like every 3rd innings he played, sorry. Like every batter is going to make 150 and 100 and then have 4 failures. They're supposed to have failures. It is really tough to be a consistently high quality batter. And as you said, whether it be a bad ball or anything else, you see this in draws, right? All the time. Of like you get a half tracker and the muscle memory kicks in and the player plays it. And of course he hits it straight to mid wicket, right? Or, hits it straight to point and everyone's really upset. And it's like, it's actually very hard to become that sort of Faf du Plessis, AB de Villiers style, right? It's actually very hard to bat like that because you've never practiced batting like that before. No. And suddenly you're in a situation where you have to do it for a day and a half. And so there is I think we forget that every decision that a batter makes is a split second decision, right? Even off a spinner, it is a split second decision. And once you make once you second guess yourself, you can actually get yourself in more trouble. How many times have you seen a guy go out in a draw, not even playing an attacking shot, but kind of a shot halfway between attacking and defending, that if they were playing the same ball in a normal game, they would smoke it. They wouldn't even think about it. Would just execute that shot every single time, right? And they in a draw, they're like not sure how to do it. That's just how the sport works, right? And I think I don't think we always understand that there is no really right way of doing this. Outside of Bradman, there really hasn't been a right way. Like there's plenty of times where you look at Sachin Tendulkar and you see him completely in control, and he would tune out for a part-time spinner. And I can tell you probably why he tuned out for the part-time spinner is that he all of his batting was set up to play someone who was putting the ball in the same area over and over again, but maybe varying the amount of spin they put on it, or the speed they put on it, or or whatever, or the angle that they delivered it from. And so all of his tricks are based on trying to work out how to play Daniel Vettori or Shane Warne or some Richard Dawson, right? Someone who is, they may not be great spinners, but they can put the ball in the right area over and over again, and they're professional. Now he's playing Cameron White, who one ball is going to bowl it on middle stump, skidding in. The next ball is going to be a half tracker down the leg side. The next one's going to be a full toss outside off stump. That actually throws a batter out of their rhythm, right? I remember, a couple of years ago, I played in the bottom level of like the Kent League in cricket, and I didn't make any runs, Varun, right? And one of the reasons I didn't make any runs is I was playing like I was playing at a high level of cricket like I had before, and in my head I was like, I'm going to take guard 2 meters out of the crease here because this guy will over pitch, right? This guy that I was facing didn't even know how to pitch the ball, right? Me being at 2 meters down the crease made no impact to this bowler because if I drove the next one, he didn't then pull his lengths back because he didn't even know how to pull his lengths back. And I think that we forget that all of these things play a part in batting, right? And the rhythm and everything else. So when it comes down to it, it's not as black and white as anyone would say. If you are, to go back to your Sachin Tendulkar point or Brian Lara point, these guys have maybe 3 shots they can play to each ball, right? Mm-hmm. Lara probably has 6, right? Sobers and Lara probably have 6 or 7 shots. AB de Villiers probably has 9, right? In a split second, they have to make a decision with all the information available to them to be able to do that. The chances of them getting it right are pretty low, right? And yet they actually do it more often than not. And that's why I've always respected Rishabh Pant type players and Quinton de Kock type players and Adam Gilchrist type players. When other people get really upset, he should have blocked that one. And it was like, well, he should have blocked the last 10, dude. But he didn't, right?
Yeah.
It is more than that. And so I think that's what we need to do is I think we need to evolve as a sport beyond that. And I think one reason I'm very fixated on this is basketball. It's very clear in basketball what is a good shot and what is a bad shot. We had a player in Denver who's now been traded to Brooklyn Nets. And he's a 6'11" small forward called Michael Porter Jr., who basically is one of the best shooters in the game. His release point, you'll like this, his release point is, I think, the second highest in the league when he shoots a jumper, right? Mm-hmm. So it's so high. So when he has a player in his face, right, it doesn't matter because they can't block the ball because he releases it from so high. So most of the shots he shot for Denver were with the he didn't even bother trying to do something to get away from the defender. He'll do one move, and then he's like, that didn't work. I'm just going to shoot it now. And he'll do it every time. He still shot at like 42% from 3-point, right, with a defender in his face. Because it's a bad shot for him that he can execute at a much higher level than anyone else. If there's a 6-foot guard playing that shot, shooting that shot, they're probably going to do it at 32%. Because they're going to have, the hand is going to get in the way. They're going to start shooting around the defender and everything else. Whereas Michael Porter doesn't see the defender, right? And it was something, Steph Curry really helped me learn this in basketball, which is he's shooting bad shots for other people. He's not shooting bad shots for him. He has the field goal percentage to prove that he should be shooting these shots, right? And so when you factor that in and you understand that Zach Crawley is playing bad shots for other drivers. He's not particularly playing bad shots for himself. as you said, there are players who are probably terrible at the scoop, right? Who should not be playing the scoop ever. There are other players who are really good at the scoop who should play it more. A bad shot is not a bad shot for everyone. And these are the things that I think we need to start to understand, because we all lauded Viv Richards for fucking playing across the line and averaging 50. You can't then suggest that they were bad shots only when he misses them.
Yeah, so there we have it, folks. Jarrod thinks that Josh Tongue is the toughest bowler Sachin Tendulkar never faced, and that's the end.
he would have struggled with it. Who's the modern spinner? I reckon Sachin would have struggled with Root.
Yeah, I can see it.
Because Root would bowl a good delivery, and so Sachin would in his mind be like, "Oh, I have to watch this guy. He's bowling." But Root would then bowl 2 full tosses outside off stump, and Sachin would like flash one to point, right?
Yeah. All right, so there we have it, folks. Thank you so much for listening up to this point. Bookmark goodareas.co. It's the one-stop shop for everything. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Brian Lara used pot plants to work on his placement. John Wright glued his glove to his bat. Sachin Tendulkar dug up practice pitches. Tatenda Taibu cut the top off his bat. Claire Taylor used a hockey grip. Steve Smith was from tennis. Dean Jones would call phantom runs. And Victor Trumper turned the nets into a war zone to survive. The best batters in the world do whatever they have to make runs. We have told their stories in our new book, The Art of Batting.